our customers and help the people that they're served feel like they belong. So one of the other things that I also cover underneath that umbrella is inclusive marketing, because you can't think about customer experience without thinking about how the signals that you're sending, in particular to people who are traditionally have been underserved. So making sure that whenever you're thinking about your customer experience, you're also creating one that is inclusive of those types of customer groups.
Very cool. Awesome. And you, Matthew, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Matthew Hunt. I've been involved in marketing and sales towards other businesses. I've mostly been focused B2B for the last 13 years. I've owned and exited 2 agencies, and now I run a company that is sort of an agency for other agencies. Occasionally I end up helping other people who sell in B2B, like consultants, coaches, or B2B SaaS companies, and I help them with their marketing and sales, usually around automation.
Awesome. So I think I figured out what the problem was. So typically attendees can't do video. So now I've turned every attendee coming in to a presenter. So you guys can just start turning your video on so that you can just quickly say hello, and then Matthew and Sonia will start speaking. But yeah, I've turned every attendee right now into a presenter. So I think you should be able to turn on your video. Was that the problem you were facing, Sonia?
I'm not sure. I changed browsers, so it seemed to work better once I changed my browser.
What browser?
Originally, I was on Safari, and then now I'm using Chrome.
You changed it. Okay, yeah. So Chrome is actually much better. So if you're an attendee and you're listening to us, I know it's difficult to talk and type, but I've turned every attendee into a presenter. So if you maybe move over to Chrome and then just refresh and come back in, I will have you on video, and then we can get the presentations. Yeah, so hi Dilo, can you hear me? Let's give it one more minute. Great. So anyone that wants to turn the video on, they can. You can just simply transition over to maybe Chrome if it's a much better browser. But yeah, you can just put your video and your mic on, and we'll be able to see you if you want to participate. But if you don't, that's also fine. I just thought, I guess because most people are used to Zoom, they might want to have their faces show. But if not, we'll just give it one more minute, and then we'll get started. So I do apologize for technical difficulties once again. But if you can't stay for the duration, I'm having the video of this recorded, and then I'll also put it in a portal where everyone that's a LinkedIn local member can just go in. You don't need to sign up, or you might sign up, but it's free or whatever. So you'll be able to watch the video at some other time. So yeah. So just all right, cool. So I guess nobody wants to turn to video. So with that said, why don't you take it away, Sonia, and tell us a little bit about what you're going to talk to us about, and then you can spend 10, maybe 15 minutes talking about it, and then Matthew's going to speak for 10, 15 minutes, and then we can have Q&A at the end.
Okay. Well, there's been a lot going on. Yes, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but also we are in the midst of a social justice movement where you've seen a lot of protests. You've seen a lot of people talking about anti-racism, and you've seen a lot of brands getting into the fray, making statements about what their values are. All of this stemmed from most recently the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis at the end of May. Since then, things have changed quite significantly. Inclusive marketing has always been important, but it's especially important more so now that a lot more people are starting to look to brands to see whether or not these brands align with their values. And they want to know that the people that they're spending their time and their hard-earned money with and their attention are brands who are on the same page as they are with regards to their values, and particularly around social justice issues, ending systemic racism, standing up for Black Lives Matter, and just being inclusive overall. So one of the things that has been helpful, because a lot of times brands have been making these statements, there have been brands that have done well, and then there are brands who have not done so well. It's more than just about the statements. It's about delivering an inclusive marketing experience overall that helps customers feel like they belong, right? So the business is about belonging, and because people life is about belonging. So customers and consumers and people are looking for places and looking for brands who make them feel like they belong, rather than ones who send the signal that you don't belong here. So in terms of what different companies and brands are able to do to help deliver inclusive marketing experiences overall, there are really 5 core steps that they can work on to help them get to that point, to where they are ensuring that they are welcoming the customers and giving them an experience that makes them feel like they belong for the people that they want to serve, while at the same time repelling the ones that they want to send away intentionally rather than unintentionally, right? Because that's the key. I think a lot of times brands have a leaky bucket with regards to different types of niche consumers, because they are inadvertently sending them signals that say you don't belong here, rather than you are welcome here. We've created this environment, we've created this space just for you, right? So how do we get to that point to where you are consistently delivering inclusive experiences to the people that you want to serve? First off, it's a great place to start is to make sure that you've got a very diverse circle of influence. In particular, if there are groups of customers who you want to serve, you need to make sure that the people who you're in your sphere of influence, and this can be your friends, it can be your peers, it can be the organizations that you get information from, it can be the organizations that you partner with, wherever you're getting your information from, or people who are influencing the way you think, the way you operate, the way you show up on a day-to-day basis. If you have people who always think the same as you, look the same as you, have the same background as you, then a lot of times you end up having a bit of an echo chamber when it comes to the way you present yourself, the way you think about problems and challenges, and the way you even see others. But if you've got a diverse group of people who are influencing the way you think, who you are learning from, who you are engaging with, who you are just kind of watching and seeing what's going on, then it expands your sphere of reference, it expands your perspective, and it allows you to think about other ways that you can serve different customer groups. It allows you to have a greater degree of empathy for people and their plight, as well as helps you to get a greater degree of understanding of how you might be able to serve them better. So an example that I like to use of this, and whereas not having a broad sphere of influence impacts the customers that you might serve, are if you were to type in nude stockings into Google, what would come up would be nude stockings that are specifically for women who all tend to have one shade. There tend to be white women. And so if you are a woman of color like me, and you want a pair of nude stockings, then the definition of nude that you're going to see isn't going to be one that necessarily fits you. Now, I am ashamed to admit that I have had to wear these nude stockings that don't match my definition of nude, and I've looked a hot mess as a result of it. But it's just because the brands or the people who are behind creating these types of stockings probably didn't have a frame of reference that made them think, oh, hey, this definition of nude only works for a certain group of people, and we're excluding another group of people, not because we're intentionally trying to do it. We just didn't think about them. It just wasn't something that was top of mind for us. because it probably wasn't in their sphere of influence. They didn't realize it was a problem. So once you start to expand your frame of reference and have other inputs, particularly of people who are different from you in multiple ways, you'll start to identify areas where you can be more inclusive, where you find opportunities where you can provide products, services, and experiences that meet the needs of a broader group of people. All right, so once you expand your sphere of influence, a good thing for you to do next is to reevaluate your buyer personas. So your buyer personas or your customer avatars, this is something that it drives a lot of different decisions in your business. It impacts your copy. It impacts the products and services that you deliver. It impacts the visuals that you put forth. And as you think about your buyer personas, if they're too narrow, they will cause you to leave out groups of people who you might want to serve or who could potentially be loyal customers to you. But because of the way you define your avatar, and if you're using that as your Bible and your springboard for all the other decisions that you're going to make, if your personas aren't robust enough to be inclusive of other people who have the problem that your business solves, then it could be setting you up to leave a lot of people out. So what you want to do is just make sure that you're thinking about all the types of people who have the problem that you want to solve, that your business solves, and think about all the different iterations or permeations of those people, and then be very intentional about who it is that you want to serve and who it is that you don't want to serve. So for instance, there is an online food blogger that I follow online. His name is Kevin Curry, and he's with the brand Fitman Cook. So if you look at a lot of the content that he produces, he's producing all these videos, and at the bottom, he's got them also, the audio is written in Spanish because he's decided that the Spanish-speaking market is one that he wants to serve. So he's intentional about making sure that all of his content speaks to this group. And he's also even gone so far as to create a Spanish language Instagram channel where he puts content specifically to speak to this audience. He's intentionally chosen that, hey, there are people who are interested in healthy recipes, and my videos and my content aren't just English speakers. There are also people who speak Spanish. So he's included them and probably have adjusted his buyer personas to be inclusive of both English speakers and Spanish speakers. So as a result, his content and the products that he has reflects that. Now, I don't think he speaks French, so he's probably intentionally chosen not to serve people who speak French or Portuguese or any other type of language, because that's not something that he is in the position to serve at that moment. You want to make sure that you are being intentional with your personas, and that will help you make the choices about how to effectively serve the people who your brand can meet their needs. Next, you want to make sure that you are very intentional about representation. Representation matters significantly, and your customers want to see themselves or who they aspire to be reflected in the imagery that your brand produces. That can be in brand photography, it can be in stock photography, it can be in the images of the people who you associate with on Instagram, or the people who make up your team, the team who works for your company. There have been a lot of brands who have talked about their solidarity, in particular with this Black Lives Matter movement that's happening right now, and with all these social justice issues, and they've talked about their commitment to diversity and inclusion. But when people go and they look at their executive team, or they go and they look at their employees, and they see that it's not diverse at all, it seems a bit incongruent. Their message doesn't really seem to match what it is that they're doing in action. So as a brand, as a company, you need to make sure that you do prioritize representation in a manner that exists not only in your marketing, so whether you're putting on conferences or you have a podcast or some type of content, that you are reflecting a diverse group of voices, so that the people that you want to serve can see themselves somehow reflected in what it is that you're producing externally in your marketing, but also within your team. I believe I heard, I read something from Jason Fried. I think he's the founder or the co-founder of Basecamp. He said that if you were to put your customer, a random group of your customers and a random group of your employees in a room, nobody should be able to tell the difference, because your employees should be a reflection of, or a cross-section of, the customers you're serving. You'll be able to better serve them whenever you have people who belong to the groups in which you're willing to serve. So make representation a priority, both internally and externally. And then your customers will be able to see themselves reflected, and they'll be able to get that signal that, hey, I do belong here, and that'll allow them to take that next step forward with you. The next thing that you should make sure that you make a priority in your inclusive marketing journey is to make cultural intelligence a priority. And it's a lifelong thing that you're going to have to spend engaging in, and making sure that not only you, but your team engages with. So if you are going to be engaging with diverse customers, people who are part of a group that you aren't a part of, it will be helpful for you to understand more about their plight, so that you can get it right and not make a lot of missteps. So going back to what we've seen a lot with this Black Lives Matter movement, with all these brands who have been making statements, they're trying to show their solidarity, they want to get involved. A lot of people have made statements, they've tried to become a part of the movement, and then you see a lot of apologies because they feel like they're messing up, or they're doing things that aren't quite being received as well. That's probably because they're not as close to the community, so they're not really sure what the right things to say are, and what's kind of taboo, and what's not going to land quite so well. So that really lends itself to a customer intimacy issue. So the more intimacy you have with your customers, the more culturally intelligent you will be, to know what are the things that are hot buttons, what are the things that you should say, what are the things that you should be staying away from, so that whenever you are getting involved and you are trying to be allies, or you're trying to just, market and promote your products, you're doing it in a way that is respectful. You're doing it in a way that makes it feel like you are part of this community, or you are somebody who is in it for the long term, that you see us, that you get us, and that you understand what works well and what doesn't. So a lot of times you see cultural intelligence working and not working so well. In June, we just finished June, which is Pride Month. So a lot of times you see a lot of brands more and more trying to show their solidarity, show their support of the LGBTQ plus community. But a lot of times the way they do that is just, they'll put a rainbow up, or they'll say Happy Pride or something like that. There has been more and more backlash from the LGBT community, in particular because they feel like brands are trying to just capitalize on the month without actually being supportive of the community. They want them to go deeper. They want them to actually be a supporter of the community, without just trying to profit from people being excited about celebrating Pride. So, you're just going to put out some merchandise that says, that's got a rainbow or Happy Pride, but you're actually not involved or a supporter of the community on an ongoing basis, or have an understanding of what some of the key issues and challenges are for that community on a regular basis, then they feel like you're just trying to capitalize on a moment, rather than actually being someone who shares their values. So a brand who does cultural intelligence really well, was very specific to the LGBTQ plus community, is Ben & Jerry's. They do a great job across the board. So not only during Pride Month are they supportive of the community, but all year long, and especially as it relates to key issues as it relates to the community. For instance, whenever marriage equality was passed in the Supreme Court, they changed some of the flavors of their ice cream to celebrate what had happened. Whenever marriage equality was not passed in Australia, for instance, they made a marketing statement where they banned their customers from being able to get two scoops of ice cream of the same flavor, just so they can understand, what it was like to not be able to have two of the same versus, forcing their customers to be able to have some ice cream that was different. So they were just trying to prove a point, but they were doing it in a culturally intelligent way because they were connected to the community. They understood their issues, they understood their challenges, and they are working on making sure that they're showing up in a way that is supportive of them all year long. So that's the fourth step. And the fifth one is just as you're going through this process is to really audit your customer experience based upon all the previous four steps. So once you go through and you decide that you want to deliver inclusive marketing, and you decide that you want to make sure that the signals that you're sending through your customer experience are saying that you belong here rather than pushing people away. First, you need to make sure that you've got a broad enough circle that will help open your eyes and broaden your horizons. You want to reevaluate your buyers' personas. You want to kind of go through every level of your customer experience, every part of your customer journey, the touch points, and to see, are they representative of the people that we say that we want to serve, particularly with our buyer personas? And for those group of people, think about, are we being culturally intelligent? Are we expanding the way we talk about our brand in a way that is reflective of the different types of groups that we are serving? Are we using references and photos and GIFs and stories that is inclusive of a broad group of people rather than just, one singular group? And are we being respectful rather than just trying to take advantage of a moment or feel like we're checking a box and doing something because we have to, but you're actually here as a long-term part of the community as well. So once you do that and you take through those 5 steps, and then you continue to cycle through them over and over and over again to just kind of tweak, say, how are we doing? Adjust based upon, the ways in which your customers are changing, the way in which your brand is changing, then you will continually be able to make your brand more and more inclusive. And ultimately, you'll be able to grow your business, and you'll be able to earn the loyalty of many people who are traditionally underserved and are looking for brands to serve them and to make them feel like they belong. And the good news is not only will you serve these people who will give you their loyalty whenever you serve them in the right way and meet their needs, but there's also a spillover effect to it. You get them, but you also get the people who are in their circle, who care about them, who want to make sure that the people who they love and who they care about are being treated well by the brands that they are giving their money to. Another quick example of this, of spillover effect in action, is I follow a gluten-free diet for health reasons. And anytime I go out to eat, which can be a bit of a tricky experience because you never really know, is there going to be something that you want to eat or something that you can eat? And is it going to be something that you want to eat that's on the menu? So anytime I go out to eat, and when I go out to eat with friends or family, I'm the one who chooses the restaurant. I'm the one who chooses the restaurant because my friends and family want to make sure that I'm well taken care of and that I am able to eat and enjoy myself. And if there's a restaurant that doesn't cater to me and my dietary restrictions, it's a restaurant that none of us go to, even though nobody else has any dietary restrictions. Me, the niche consumer, becomes the lead consumer, becomes the one who is the decision maker, and the people who are in my inner circle who are with me, they want me to be able to enjoy. And because of that, I think the lowest common denominator. So we all go to the place that works well for me. And in that sense, it works for all of us.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Sonia. I really learned a lot. It was funny when you were talking about it. I just read an article this afternoon from Anchor newsletter, and it was talking about diversity in Hollywood. So the guy goes through all the Hollywood studios, and he takes a snapshot of all the leaders, and he finds that there are only 5 people of color out of like 150 to 200 people in leadership in Hollywood. So he's now like, hey guys, you guys are supporting this movement. You're talking about diversity, but your leadership is not reflecting that, and your content is not reflecting that. So now they're like, hey, we need to actually change this by showing that if you bring in a more diverse leadership in place, you will also be able to find the stories that not only reflect your own taste and your own beliefs and your own issues, but you also find richer content that will serve a broader swath of people, and then that'll also help you grow your business. So it was just funny that you mentioned that, because I just read it this afternoon. I was like, even in Disney, that is trying to be like everything to everybody, they were like the most egregious people because they didn't even have any person of color in their leadership board. So it's just interesting to note. So thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks for sharing that song. Yeah. If you have any questions, we'll wait till the end after Matt, and then we can ask both our speakers questions. Now I'll hand it over to you, Matt, to your talk.
Yeah, sure. Sonia, I love. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You can hear me okay? Sonia,
yes.
Sonia, I loved, I was taking notes when you were, but you talked about like cultural intelligence, and you hear all the time about EQ and IQ, but that's the first time I've actually heard that term. And it was just like a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, yeah, well, of course. And then I started thinking, well, we have all these brand books and things like that, but do we actually have like a brand book for cultural intelligence? Like, and are they taking the time to do that? It's really, really interesting and fascinating. I think that, a lot of things are on the right track, what you're talking about to some degree, because everything's becoming more democratized with the internet in general over time, but we still have such a long ways to go to solving a lot of these problems. But it's really, really interesting work and an important role. I really enjoyed hearing what you had to say today. That was great. Yeah. I don't specialize in what you do and don't have a lot of expertise in that, but I do focus a lot of the times on foundational work when I'm working with people before we get started. And it still comes back to the same thing. So I talk to a lot of people all the time with when you're building a B2B business, it starts with community. And it's kind of the same thing. And community is all inclusive, and creating that community and listening to your customers and clients is the ideal thing. And one of the things that I try to get people to do is when they start with a community offer and to do some things that don't scale. So this means like doing a welcome call to your community, which is an opportunity to do some consumer insights and to listen and to hear what it is that people are looking for. And I remember you referencing like Jason Fried. He's like the king on listening to customers and really figuring out what are those first principles that people are interested in. And so it's a running theme that seems to be recreated, that if we just spend a little bit more time listening, we might find all the right answers to how to run our business appropriately. Or even like Simon Sinek, he says it all the time. I hate to reference him. It's kind of like an old reference, but start with why. I mean, we don't really care what you do as a company anymore until we really care why you do it. And the brands that really focus their time on community and values kind of set themselves up for success with less false starts. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done around this. It's really interesting. There's one brand, as soon as you were talking, that I was like, that I just ran into just the other day, because it was one of my clients' Dream 100 clients. Have you ever heard of girlfriend.com? It was the first time I'd heard about it. If you check it out, they're doing a good job in the sense of, if you Google it, I thought that they're doing a pretty good job on the surface level of my first impression about a lot of things that you talked about today. And then, what I always tell people too is, because things are breaking down to smaller and smaller and smaller communities over time, there's also an opportunity to this. There's you talked about the person who decided to put, Spanish closed captions, or there's an opportunity to serve a marketplace that's being underserved that will allow you to grow another business. And it may start there, but it can turn into something bigger, like you said. And so it's almost like if you can do this well, it almost becomes an unfair advantage, right? That other companies just can't get it together. So I think it's just really, really fascinating, really, really neat. And you got me thinking about some things I need to work into my course now. I might want to talk to you afterwards.
Absolutely.
There's some things that haven't been brought up and addressed, and it's really interesting. I've had a couple companies, and even like when I look at our diversity, I look back at our internal versus external. We are in the tech sector. We did pretty good, like gender wise and whatever, but we didn't actually do good until we created values. We learned something from a gentleman named Cameron Harold, who was the CEO of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And then he's gone on to coach many companies since then, like a lot of great companies. Yeah. And he runs something called the Cool Alliance, and he has a book he wrote that's called The Vivid Vision. And we took his steps. And once we got that clear about what we stood for and what we wouldn't stand for, we found more of that diversity that you talked about just automatically without even trying. So it was, before that, it wasn't. It was, it certainly didn't look like that. And then when you have it internally, like you said, it's easy to reflect it externally. So it always happens in-house, but it's the same thing. Like how you treat your people too depends on how happy your customers are too, like period.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like common sense, but it's for some reason we seem to all miss it. So,
Yeah.
it's like, really, come on, like, like, do we really need, it's like silly that we even have to talk about it, but yeah, but important work. So so I'll talk a little bit about maybe what I do. So I work with a lot of B2B companies, and what I love about all the different crises that are going on and things that are happening today due to COVID-19, is that it's forced many people to actually do the right things. They actually have to lead in the right way, because we're kind of past the point now where people are scared to sell anymore, which is nice. But prior to that, what we were telling people to do is like, look, people only buy from people that they know, like, and trust. And you can't do any selling until you have that. And really, at the end of the day, people are trying to go too fast. They're just trying to sell their stuff, right? And I think you made this reference again, where companies are hitching their ride to something, of whatever the holiday or celebration is, or cultural event is, to the month, and it doesn't feel authentic anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they wonder why they're getting a little bit of flashback, because they're just looking at it as a marketing opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same thing here. No matter what you're doing, at the end of the day, if you don't recognize where you are in the relationship first and acknowledge it with people, you can't really start selling. And it doesn't matter if it's a B2C or a B2B company. At the end of the day, even though I focus on B2B, you can't close a sale until you have that trust. So I focus a lot of times B2B companies know who their ideal client is, because they're marketing other companies. It's very clear for them to figure out how it is. So it's easy to like build a list today. But the mistake they make is they do cold outreach, or they don't get the response they're looking for. And it's because they forgot that they're a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
Stranger means danger, right? So this is, we've been teaching this to our kids since they're 3 years old, and they can kind of recognize that. And we all remember being taught that, and we just react without even realizing we're reacting that way when we run to someone who sort of moves something too far ahead. And that's a problem. But if we reached out first with building some goodwill or adding amazing value, and I find two strategies that work really well. One is to offer the ability to join your community, in an ideally private community. And I actually encourage people to make them isolated specific groups to whoever your ideal client is. Not to be exclusive, but in the sense of that birds of a feather like to flock together. So what doesn't work is if it's too generic in nature, right? So this is the old expression of like the riches are in the niches, but it has to be, and this has to do with more like, CTOs want to hang out with CTOs, or dentists want to hang out with dentists, or entrepreneurs but want to hang out with entrepreneurs, but they really want to hang out with more people who look like them. Tech people want to hang out with tech people, and a small business people want to hang out with small business. You get the idea. But if you can create an environment that gives them that community or that connection, because often people in their individual roles have their own agendas, and often they're alone. So like imagine you're a CMO in a company, you're the only CMO, you don't have anybody else to hang out with.
Right.
Just like brainstorm and just shop talk stuff, that your own struggles and frustrations that you're going through in a safe environment. And if you can offer that to them, it works really, really well. So that was like one way that I grew one of my agencies, was I targeted the Fortune 1000, and the Fortune 1000 is very hard to get a hold of. But one tactic that I used that worked really well was I created since all of them are in Toronto, was I created a mastermind dinner. But I didn't make it about my company or my services. What I said was, I'm getting together 4 or 5 CMOs in Toronto. They're all Fortune 1000 companies. Come on out to dinner. We'll break bread. Dinner's on me. You guys can talk to each other. And then I strategically at the dinner made sure that I was a good host and got them talking and helping each other. What ends up happening is I knew what would happen was they would get to know me and like me and maybe start to trust me. And what ends up happening is we only buy from people that we trust. It's not about price, or it's not about, whether your services are better or worse. Often it's about that connection again of like why, and not what you do. Because a lot of times we can't tell the difference between other companies. So that first step, now that that's been crossed, I have the ability to do some selling only if they ask me. But usually what would happen is out of a group of 5, one would at some people, so they would ask me at some point, like, what do you do? And I would have a good answer for it. In which case they'd be like, oh, that's really interesting. I would love to talk to you about that. In which case I would schedule another appointment for it, because the last thing you want to go into is a pitch with a bunch of people you just met, because you start to have that commission breath smell, right? And nobody likes to smell commission breath. And so you have to actually take the sale away and be patient and realize that you need to build a little bit more goodwill before that's there. And once you recognize and get this into a system, then that's when you start to have more predictable sales, and you start to have the right kind of sales, and you start to be able to cherry pick the right kind of clients, right? And which is really important. And those are usually based on, again, on your company's values. And when you cherry pick the right kind of clients, things are a lot easier. You're not lowering your price for the sake of lowering your price. You have the ability to make sure you onboard the right people for your team. So I've made a lot of mistakes in my career where I was making a sale because I needed a sale, and that was not the right answer. And it caused so many more problems. It lowered the morale for my team, right? It created so many of the problems. The client ended up churning anyways, just because there was so much friction from day one, instead of, repelling some of the wrong people who didn't share the same values. And the real root cause of why that wasn't happening was because I didn't have a system or enough leads, right? And then beyond that, the reason why I didn't have enough leads was because I wasn't using automation or positioning to get enough of the right leads in a predictable way. Like, so I got my leads in a few different ways. I would get my leads either through referral and good work, which is good, but it's not always the right people, right? Just because you get referrals doesn't mean that they're great. But because I didn't have more leads, I would close clients that were maybe not perfect or a little bit outside the edges of what it is that we do. And maybe there was a service that we didn't really do that good, but we said we could do it anyways because we needed a sale. That's not great, right? Or maybe I would do some prospecting, but then what would happen is you get busy fulfilling for that client or customer, and then you stop your prospecting, and then the sales pipeline dries up, right? So you go through this feast and famine experience again. Or I did inbound marketing as well too. And it's crazy. I sold inbound marketing services, but I finally had an epiphany halfway through my career in the agency world that I actually got my clients from outbound, because so it almost went against what I believed in. So I had a limiting belief, that you could do both and both add value, or that you could get your clients through outbound even though you sold inbound. It just took a while for me to wrap my brain in. But once I realized that a lot of inbound leads were driving me all sorts of irrelevant leads, right? That was a problem too. I ended up deleting 75% of the content on our website and deleting half of our database because I had all the wrong people in there, and it was due to inbound marketing. So I had to almost start from scratch. So I actually encourage people, if you're in a B2B, the trick is you start with building a list, and it's garbage in, garbage out. You need to take the time to scrub the list. Then you need to come up with an offer that connects with people in some way. Community is great. Mastermind dinner is great. You can even do an interview strategy, which is great. So even just like starting a podcast or something like that is a great way, or something like this is a great way to get your content made for free. And you get to usually up your status. And so the trick is you interview the 1% that your community aspires to be. And what ends up happening is you have, expert number one in that community that they all aspire to be. And then there's you. And then you have expert number two. And then there's you. And then there's the expert number three. And then there's you. And then there's expert number four. And there's you. Well, all the experts and all the people they aspire to be come and go, but you're the one anchor that's there. And so the mistake is they're so busy trying to be the expert. And it's really hard to do that. It's actually easier to seek the experts and think like a talent scout. And then what you want to do is you want to do what a lot of these amazing people do today. You want to become the Oprah of your industry. And Oprah's not an expert of anything, but what she's really good at doing is finding really interesting people, interviewing them, and teaching her community, her audience, what to look for and what to look out for. And the byproduct is she ends up banking all this trust equity that she can make a withdrawal whenever she wants. So for example, like right now, let's say it was COVID. She hasn't been on the circuit in many, many years, but extremely influential still today, right? And if she decided to get on Twitter and make a tweet and say, you know what, there's this company, there's this product, I'm really crazy about it. They're an amazing company. Love, 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 love their product. And she sends it out a tweet and they're barely surviving. Well, what would happen the next day? They would go from surviving to thriving.
Yep.
Like that, right? And she's not the only one doing this. Tim Ferriss has done the same thing. So he wrote the 4-Hour Work Week, but after that, he has his podcast, and all he's done is interview other experts. And now he's taken all the experts' excerpts and turned them into these huge books where he's curated all of their information. So he's not an expert of anything again. He's just curating that information and connecting it to an audience or a community. And so what I try to teach people today is you don't want leads and you don't want sales. That's not the actual root cause. What you actually want to do is build community and build trust. The byproduct is leads and sales at the end of the day. And there's all kinds of different tactics and things that you can do, but that's sort of the gist about it. And the problem is we're just not actually treating the root cause of the problem. So it's kind of like the iceberg, right? We all are looking at the tip of the iceberg, but really underneath that water, there's something else that's going on. And there's a concept called I think it's called the 5 whys. And I don't know who came up with it, but someone can Google it. But we even used to do this in my company when we did postmortems for every project, good or bad. And we would just kind of figure out how we could get better. And we'd always say, well, why are we doing this? But then why? And then why? And then why? And all of a sudden you get to the root cause of really what's going on, So like my example, if I wanted more sales in my company, but it's driven by the wrong goal, and I was focused on the wrong thing. I really needed more leads, but I didn't really need more leads. I actually needed better positioning and a better offer. And the real root cause is I just had no trust. Right? Because if you just had that, then you have influence. and price and all these other things kind of melt away, right? So everyone's so busy about optimizing their funnels and their copy and their sales copy and creating all this content and doing all these things. And really, it could be as simple as build a list, invite them to dinner, build some goodwill, and close some sales.
Yeah. Yeah.
We really overcomplicate this stuff. And this is really how business has been done for hundreds and hundreds of years prior to this internet thing, right?
Absolutely.
And prior to all this social media stuff. And I think when we are doing social media and broadcasting, if you can even think of switching it around from, instead of this one-to-many broadcasting format, what's more powerful is when you think of building organizations that leverage peer-to-peer. Mm-hmm. Because so everyone's, and this is the thing, at the end of the day, the brands I think that are doing this in both B2C and B2B are the ones that are winning. When it's happening is you actually end up leveraging what's called the network effect. Mm-hmm. And the network effect is any system that gets better the more people you add to it. So some of the biggest brands in the world today leverage the network effect. So Facebook does, YouTube does, Amazon does, Uber does, eBay uses it. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but they're not trying to create the content. Like Facebook doesn't create content, barely any, right? They just enable other people to create the content and create micro communities within micro communities, right? And so with your brand, it's not that you only have to have one community, but start with one and master that one. And then you can always build additional communities that are self-sustaining on their own. And what ends up happening is the community creates 80% of your content and you create 20% of it, which follows the 80-20 rule, right? Yeah. So it really comes back to, at the end of the day, what I've learned is there's some universal principles or laws that are almost tied to physics, not to get so woo-woo, right? But it's legitimately, it's science. Like these things follow a pattern, like something called the Fibonacci sequence, like, or compound interest, or there's the flywheel effect, or there's the snowball effect, or there's the universal, there's the network effect, or we get into like Newton's friction laws. Like if you want something to go faster, all we need to do is remove friction, right? How do we remove friction, like, and make it easier for everyone? Yeah. And once people start doing that, I find they start getting better results, right? And this is sort of the whole less is more. It's tricky. It's not easy. But if you can get it down, it works really well.
Definitely.
Well, I just had like the longest monologue ever. I'll leave it there and see if there's some questions.
All right, thanks for sharing, Matt. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So, thanks for sharing, Matt. Apologies, I was cutting in and out. My connection was a bit bad here, but the recording is recording on the cloud, so I'm sure everybody will be able to catch it on the replay, and I'll catch most of it on the replay. But if you have any questions for either Sonia or Matt, you can type it in now. I see here Cheryl says no questions. Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's okay. My bad, Cheryl. I guess maybe
Oh.
Hey, Sonia, can I ask you some questions? Would it be cool if I asked you some? I know that everyone's coming in and out, but I thought we maybe could keep it going.
For sure.
So I'm really curious, like, so the cultural intelligence, like, so are companies hiring that role now? Is that like an actual role that they're being mindful of yet? Or is this totally just a brand new concept that they need to do this?
I think what's happening is, so to answer your first question, no, I don't believe that they're hiring for this, not internally or nor at the agency. right?
Okay.
And because of this, a lot of times they're falling short.
Yeah.
So a great example of this is, I think it was Dolce and Gabbana. They just tried to
Mm.
enter China, and they ended up, the founders had to make an apology video because the marketing and the promotions that they put out were very culturally insensitive.
Wow.
And because of that, I think brands have just thought that they can do a lot of the same. Basically, they're taking like a one size fits all mass market approach, and they're putting it
Yeah.
into whatever different markets they're going into. And I think more and more they're starting to figure out that you can't just do that. You do need to have a good understanding of it. So Disney, for instance, whenever they made the movie Coco,
Okay.
they got into trouble first
Mm.
because they tried to patent Day of the Dead, and people thought that they were trying to capitalize off of
Mm.
a very cultural, a significant holiday to
Mm.
the Mexican people. So
Mm.
ultimately, what did they do? They hired cultural consultants for specifically for the Latin market
Mhm.
and for Mexico that helped them understand more of the market that they were trying to portray,
Mm.
the people that they were trying to portray within
Yeah.
their movie. So depending upon, if you don't have a degree of intimacy for a particular customer group within your brand, that's not um, something that you're doing, and it's not a competency of your agency, then
Mhm.
definitely a cultural intelligence role could be very important, or at the very least hire somebody who can help you develop that expertise, whether it's a consultant,
Mm.
whether it's maybe your employee resource groups internally, and here it goes, helping people who reflect the customers that you want to serve on your team, but
Mhm.
they need to be able to translate that knowledge. They can't be the only person who has that level of intelligence. It needs to be
Mm.
something that your team has on an ongoing basis. So everybody who comes on your brand, if they're going to be working and serving a particular audience, they've all got a degree of intelligence on whatever customer groups that you're going to be serving, both your
Mhm.
brand team and your agency, because the brand team, of
Mm.
course, is doing one job, but if the agency is executing it, they need that same degree of intelligence as well, if not
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Do you believe that, like, do they need to hire small different teams for each different culture and group, or do you think that there's a ability to create like a framework that any team could learn how to deal with it, appropriately? And like,
So a lot of
how do we solve this? Like, besides hiring lots of different consultants and teams, it's not always
Mhm.
doable for all companies too,
Right.
right?
It's not
Yeah.
always doable, but let's say there's a resource that you can tap into.
Mm.
So for instance, if you want to reach the African American community,
Hmm.
yes, you can hire a multicultural agency that helps you do that. You can make sure that it's a competency on your team,
Mm.
or maybe there's an external resource that you can tap into, that if you're going to be reaching out to the African American community, your agency, your brand team, they're the ones that can tap into this resource. So it helps you get a greater degree of understanding. It might not be
Hmm.
very specific to your brand, but it gives you a foundation for which you can work towards. And then you can then use that to do appropriate market research. You can use
Hmm.
that to make sure that your brand team is grounded and they have the degree of intimacy that's needed to be able to effectively speak to a group of people.
Yeah.
So maybe like a third party resource might be helpful, because I recently worked with a client in the um, workers' compensation industry.
Yeah.
And as I was doing interviews for getting some voice of the customer interviews, a lot of the people within workers' comp were saying that they get like a workers' comp update, like directly to their inbox every week. It's a subscription service that they subscribe to that keeps them up to date on that type of stuff.
Oh, that's
So
brilliant.
it would be helpful for, and this is actually a product that I'm working on,
I
some type of
love that idea.
service that
Yeah.
helps send out cultural intelligence type information on different topics.
Yeah.
Each month is a different topic, but it's a repository that helps them be able to tap into this type of information that would help them do well at Pride campaigns, do well with Black History Month, do well overall with just kind of making sure that you understand different markets. So that whenever it comes time to put your campaigns together, you've got a deeper understanding of that group.
Yeah, so many business ideas all of a sudden come to my mind when you just said that, because that's the entrepreneur in me, right?
Yeah.
But there's already like all this curation for things that, I'll give you an example. Like there's like in the technical marketing industry, like there's these lists that you can subscribe to for insider information about.
Matthew?
Yeah.
Matt, I think there's a question for you here from Francis. And Francis is asking, what are some of the best ways to start or build a community from your point of view?
Sure. So I think the answer always is think about where your ideal audience likes to hang out and makes sense for them, and then go there. So if your audience is maybe on Facebook, it might make sense to have a Facebook group there. If your audience is on LinkedIn, it might make more sense to be on LinkedIn. If it's more of a tech community, it might be Slack. You might also want to just have your own software that you create and use like a third-party software like Mighty Networks to do it, which is a great one to do it. There's a lot of them out there. If you just type in community software, you'll find a whole bunch of them. And sometimes community is not just online. It's we think of it like that right now because it's post-COVID-19. But what I like to call belly to belly community is good. This is so even this LinkedIn community, here's a LinkedIn meetup, was belly to belly before that. And I think having a combination of both is important for any brand, to have both events where people can meet each other, as well as one digitally and different sizes. And you might even want to think of creating community where there is a value ladder to it. So you might have an intro community that is like free for everyone, but then you have to qualify to get to different levels of community. I mean, you see this, there's a lot of brands that do this. This is why, there's a lot of brands, there's a lot of people who will pay a lot of money to fly to Necker Island just so they can rub elbows and take pictures with the wealthy elite like Richard Branson, right? And it's really just it's an ego thing, it's a status thing, but it exists, and these things exist today. So it just depends on what your goals are and where you're at. And sometimes you even need to take your community and make it super hard to get into, as in like private. This is why like private ski clubs work, private yacht clubs, supper clubs, golf clubs. It's always been something that people want to do. And it's not even that. I mean, people who are really into cars are into cars, but they're not just into any cars, right? There's so many different types of cars. There's the guys who soup up their Hondas, and then there's the other guys who are into super fast sports cars, and there's other ones who are into only muscle cars that are American muscle cars. So you have to really, I always say, figure out who that ideal customer base is. Think about where they like to hang out. Go there and create as little friction as possible for them to participate. Hopefully that answers the question.
Oh, I can't hear him.
I know, me too. Here, I'll just put him. I'll see if he maybe sees the question. Can't.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now we can hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we got you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Maybe he can't hear us. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know, but we can hear each other, right, Sonia?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
That's
I can
funny.
hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can hear you. Oh no.
Oh, okay. So I was saying before the pandemic, and there was this group of Ferrari enthusiasts, and there were like 20, 30 of them with all different types of like classic expensive Ferraris. So yeah, there's always I think they said the club dues were like $50,000-$60,000 to join a year. And I was like, well, if you're
Yeah.
driving a Ferrari that's like $300,000, 50,000 is not a whole lot to be part of the group.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it kind of
Yeah.
makes sense
Yeah.
that if you have a very exclusive audience and you build a community around it, then yeah, you can actually sell and make as much money as you can from that in an ethical and positive way. So
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure hosting you, Sonia, you, Matthew, and everyone else that was able to make it on the call today. I truly appreciate
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
it.
Sonia, I'm going to message you.
Okay, great.
All right.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Okay, so that's it. Thank you guys for participating once again. I appreciate it, and I'll be sure to send you a link to the recording once it's rendered and ready to go. So take care and have fun. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.